Hi, good evening to all of you, and good morning, Srikar. And let me have the pleasure of welcoming today's guest of honor and very distinguished civil servant, Srikar Mysore Sridhar. And like we published, he's going to be talking to us on navigating the digital transformation under different challenges. And specifically, he's going to talk to us on two very important initiatives that the country has ever seen. One is on other one is on the GST. I think very closely he was associated with. And let me also formally introduce him. He's, like he said, he's a distinguished civil servant, and he's from Karnataka. So he's the Karnataka cadre IS officer. And just before he is just about to complete his sabbatical from the prestigious Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, right? Before that, he was the Commissioner of Commercial Taxes, Government of Karnataka, between October 2017 to July 2021. And prior to this, he was also serving as Indian mission mission to the World Trade Organization as a legal advisor on trade and services negotiated from 2014 to 2017. And he also served as India's legal trade and services negotiator in bilateral and international trade negotiation in the Ministry of Commerce, Government of India. And between 2009 and 2013 is when I think he had the best part of course, we are wishing that even the best is yet to come. But I think what we have seen is the kind of work that he has done when he was part of the other project. So between 2019 and 2013, he has involved in the ideation and implementation of the other project as private secretary to Nandan Nilekani, who was a cabinet rank minister as chairman of the Unique Identification Authority of India, that is the other project popularly known as. And he was also serving in different capacities in the state government of Karnataka. He was also district magistrate in Dharwad district and special commissioner of the Bangalore Municipal Corporation. And like he said, currently he is joining us from Boston, where he's about to complete his Fulbright scholarship program as a participant at the MASH Mid-Career Masters in Public Administration program from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And it's a great pleasure to have you, Srikar, and over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagendra, and welcome to all participants. Good evening. So what I would try to share in this time is my experience and reflection on two journeys, GST and Aadhaar. Let me just share my screen so that is it visible, Dr. Nagendra?
Yes, it's visible. Absolutely.
Okay. So what I plan to do is basically talk for around 30-35 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for any questions and discussion. I'd like you to raise any issues or questions you have. Firstly, let me thank Dr. Nagendra and his team for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be on this platform, and I wish it the best. So what I'm going to talk to you today is, navigating digital transformation under challenging situations, which is a practitioner's view. Why I call it the practitioner's view is because I'm, as a civil servant, I've worked in assignments which have involved digital transformation. So this is a kind of a reflection on the journey, that limited journey. I wouldn't say it's a overarching journey, but limited journey in my experience, and what these transformations have brought about in terms of what we need to do and the lessons. So what I would cover today are two journeys of digital transformation, and both are familiar to all of you, Aadhaar and the goods and services tax. I will not be talking too much about the projects itself, because that is a different context. I will try to kind of limit myself to the digital or technology aspect of it, what the context of these projects have been in the context of technology change, what the challenges they've brought about, and what lessons can we learn from some of them. So let me first start with Aadhaar. We're all familiar with Aadhaar. So I mean, if I was doing this presentation 8 years ago, then a lot of explanation would have been required, but may not be today. But just to kind of highlight some of the contexts that Aadhaar was brought under. So we all know the context and idea of Aadhaar, right? So the proof of identity is a very important concept in developing countries, especially for people who don't have any proof of identity. And if you look at identity systems which were there prior to Aadhaar in India, you had around 250 million had PAN cards, 60 million or so have passports, 180 million have driving licenses, and 600 million have voter ID cards. But there was neither a unique or universal identity across the country, which every individual resident had. And none of these identities were digital in that sense, in the sense that, biometric based, or in the sense that they could be authenticated online. And if you look at, in India, in the context of birth certificates, in a large part of our country, neither school certificates, which is shown here, or birth certificates are universal, because the lack of institutional deliveries, as well as a schooling system. A lot of people don't have these documents. So there was a felt need in government that you needed one identity, which every Indian resident could have, and which was basically a digital identity which could establish the proof. And this kind of brought us to the motivations of Aadhaar, where what was this identity required for? One is identity proof for development, right? So it is not, so for people who do not have any proof of identity, proof of identity itself is a great source of emancipation. Having a document which says who you are is very important for on an inclusion aspect. And secondly, it gives a lot of access to services, subsidies, and benefits. So when you can prove your identity to the state or the government, and then access to those services become much easier, delivery of those services much easier, and it is a great tool of inclusion and empowerment. But what is important in Aadhaar was it was not merely an identity. You have an Aadhaar number on a card. You might have cut it out and kept it in your wallets or documents. But the uniqueness, it is a digital ID. And digital ID in the sense is that it is basically a unique identity linked to a particular person. The number is important, not the card. And it is for residents and not for citizens. And when I say unique and digital, what do we mean? Basically, Aadhaar, and this is very important in the context of digital transformation and digital projects, it adopted a very minimalistic approach. So when you say simple design, minimalistic approach, if you just reflect on the data in Aadhaar, what you've given for Aadhaar, it has no data on religion, no data on economic status, no data on caste or community, no data on your educational qualification, and it is a random unique number. And the purpose of Aadhaar was basically only to establish your identity. So you say that I am so and so person, these are my biometrics, and this is who I am. And that was the limited purpose of Aadhaar. And I'll come to why that is very important in the context of how digital transformation can take place. So this created a digital identity system from two sets of data, right? It was one, your demographic data, which is your name, date of birth, your gender, address. Mobile and email was optional. And you had your biometrics. So biometrics was all 10 fingerprints and your iris. These two sets of data, which was collected from every resident, created this unique random number, which has no. So if you look at a number, Aadhaar number of any person, you cannot say that that person is from, say, Karnataka or from Tripura, or that person is urban or a rural. You cannot say anything. It's a number which establishes based on biometrics. And this is very important, where enrollment, all of you must have gone, those of you who have Aadhaar numbers, and now that 1.3 billion people in India have Aadhaar numbers, I guess most of you here would have it. You would have gone for an enrollment, first time enrollment, where you give all your fingerprints and your iris, and you get your Aadhaar number. And this, in 2009, when the project was started, was zero. So nobody had this Aadhaar number. So what happened in a matter of, when it was launched in 2010, so a matter of 5 or 6 years, more than 1 billion people had this identity. So think of the scale of digital transformation. Nowhere in the world has digital transformation occurred where entire populations, this is 600 million is, population of probably United States and Europe put together, and happened in 5 years with technology. And what India did and the other project did was it leapfrogged the technology. So ID systems are there throughout the world. You have identification systems. If you go to any part of the country, you'll have some form of ID system. But there's no ID system which is digital in the sense that you have all the biometrics and data and it can be authenticated online. I'll come to authentication. And what India did was this deduplication, which is unique in any country, which is the largest database. The other database is the largest database, even larger than 10 times larger than the FBI database today, biometric database. So what do you mean by deduplication? Just for for a brief idea. So when you enroll the first time, all your data is given, your fingerprints and your iris is given, your name is taken. You don't get the Aadhaar number immediately. If you notice, you get an enrollment EID. You get an enrollment ID, and then the Aadhaar number comes by post, or you can download it. Why is that? Because when your biometrics and data is given, it goes to the central database. It is transmitted to the central database, and it is checked against the existing biometrics and data already there in the system, and a deduplication process is conducted. What does that mean? That is, this data should not already exist in the database. So it's basically a unique system where if you're already in the database, you don't get another number. So this is an extremely complex technology system which was developed in-house in India, which was basically a project of government. And this was a technology leapfrogging, and important in the context of technology and digital transformation. And the scale at which it was implemented, if you look at the numbers here, which is staggering, it was implemented because of a number of factors which I will come to. But this, I just wanted to give an overview of how technology was so complex. The scale and implementation was done, which was quite unthinkable at that time. It was rolled out in various states, in 30 states over time, with varying political dispensation. So in the context of public projects, you must remember that these are done in very challenging circumstances. That's why the topic is navigating under challenging circumstances. It is just not an IT project where you can do an IT project, everybody comes together. You have to get political consensus, you have to get political buy-in, and there are large set of stakeholders in public. So those of you who interact with public sector, and some of you are in the public sector, will notice that there are a large number of stakeholders in IT projects. IT projects are not, it is not just driven, it does not operate in a vacuum. You have a bureaucratic system, you have civil society who thinks that technology should function in a particular way. You have the technology ecosystem, that is the vendors, the technology, biometric, the devices, the whole software. And then you have critics. You have people who don't think the technology or this system is good for any particular way. So you have to navigate the system, and Aadhaar did that navigation very well. And just to come back to this technology leapfrogging and digital ID, why is it different? Because when you get an Aadhaar number, your biometric, you can authenticate your identity by giving your demographic data, name, and your Aadhaar number, and you can authenticate yes or no. I'm sure you have authenticated in some circumstances. So this identity is it can be authenticated online over a mobile phone. And this is very important for services. It is very important to give benefits. It's very important to establish your identity in a very easy manner. For example, if you have a driving license, you show the driving license and somebody believes that the driving license is true. There's no way of authenticating online, putting the number and doing it. But in Aadhaar, you cannot. You might have a fake Aadhaar card, but you give a number. But if I have to check it, authenticate it online, I can always authenticate it and establish that is it a right identity or not. And this authentication is the key in Aadhaar. This is the difference between Aadhaar and many digital ID projects, because what authentication does is that when you give your Aadhaar number and you authenticate with your fingerprint, just one fingerprint, and say yes or no, for basic identity, you can authenticate. For eKYC, electronic know your customer norms, for opening a bank account, for opening a mutual fund account, or opening many financial product accounts. So it's very, very, very useful for that. For digital transactions, because digital transactions require a secure ID, so it's useful for that. And for accessing services and benefits, because government gives a lot of services and benefits which require identity proof. And the direct benefit can be can go directly to the bank account of the customer. So this authentication is the key, and this has been used. And look at the authentication trend in India today. This is from the dashboard of the UID. It's a public document available. So look at the authentication which is taking place across the country every month. This is the latest data. So I got it yesterday. I mean, this is what I don't know, this is 80 million or 80, it's a huge number. So basically, I'm saying that authentication is happening on a daily basis, and people are getting benefits in different ways. And this is a live data system. So digital transformation requires that data systems are not some silo somewhere which is done once and forgotten. It has to be used and a live system. And how did this digital transformation take place? And how did this project come about in such a short time, considering the scale? I mean, in 5 or 6 years, the scale was achieved. And it was achieved in a number of ways. And I'll just go through that now. So, and under what challenging circumstances it was achieved. One was, it was a ecosystem development model. So this technology, this whole project was an ecosystem model. What do we mean by ecosystem model? There were multiple registrars who were doing the enrollment. If you remember, when enrollment was being done 5 or 6 years back or 7 years back, you will remember that you either had to go to a state government office, you could also go to a bank, you could also go to LIC office to enroll, you could also go to a post office in some states. So there were multiple registrars. If you couldn't go to one place, you could go to another. There were multiple enrollment agencies. So these registrars employed got enrollment agencies to do it. It was not done by themselves. The state government didn't use its bureaucracy to enroll. It used private enrollment agencies with a system. And there were more than 300 enrollment agencies across the country. So you could also, in fact, you had a choice of going to different places. You had more than 1 lakh operators, certification operators, training of operators. You had multiple device vendors who provided the biometric service sensors. And you had multiple biometric deduplication service providers at the back end to deduplicate the data. So why I'm kind of saying this is important is, one is that there was standardization. That is, the software was standardized, the biometric details were standardized, the data quality that had to be collected was standardized. But there was choice and competition also amongst this. So if you, I mean, I remember that sometimes if the state government, the enrollment centers were not functioning, people had choice. May not be everywhere, may not be in all circumstances. You know, in some villages, maybe it was only one center was there, but in cities especially, there was a lot of choice in getting this, this number. And the design of the project, the digital design of the project was a very asynchronized design. What do I mean by asynchronized design? In government and in digital projects, sometimes you think everything has to be done at the same time, at the same scale, same scope. So if you want to start registration, everybody has to be enrolled from tomorrow. It's a very difficult process. How do you address that? This was addressed in a very unique way in Aadhaar. One was the registrars came on board at their own pace. For example, some states, you remember, had started enrolling earlier than other states. It was not that on day 1, 2009, every state said from tomorrow you come and start doing Aadhaar. Some states decided they will do it early. Some states took time. Some registrars came later. So it was, the system was put in place that you can come in any time and start the process. Enrollments were starting in different times in different states. Enrollment agencies came on board as they were ready. So enrollment agencies, there were 100 in the beginning. Then more people got standardized. They got the certification. They came on board. Residents could enroll, as I said, anytime, anywhere. And technology vendors could get their systems and devices certified. So it was kind of asynchronous as well as an ecosystem where more people could come in and join the bandwagon. And this is important for technology projects because a big bang sometimes doesn't, work for the scale. So, and India, as complex that is, we should be careful of it. Another design element, another important challenging circumstance was public and private sector. How do you come together in this project? If you remember, and this is a very important thing in technology projects, and many of you are in private sector, work with government. How can we work together to get a digital? No solution can be done only by the public sector, only by private sector, especially big projects. You have to come together. State machinery, normally, if you look at a government, if you think of government bureaucracy, you think it is very lethargic. You think that there's hierarchy. No, this office is, this is a very old office. It's not now, this is not a stereotypical government office, but there is a perception that is all bureaucratic, it is red tape. But the state government and public sector provide scale and reach. You can reach the remotest corner. Private sector agency cannot reach a remotest corner, but the government machinery reaches the remotest corner. And stakeholder involvement and involving everybody can be done only by the state government. It can bring everybody together. So these are the advantages of the state. What are the advantages of the private sector? Private sector, normally techies, techies are, always in jeans, and you come in, you're not too hung up about formal stuff, informal, non-hierarchical. Though many, I mean, I would say that many private companies are as hierarchical as government, but there is a certain sense of non-hierarchy, and as compared to the government, and more innovation and out-of-box thinking is possible in the private sector. So these two worlds have to meet. And in Aadhaar, what happened was there was a tension but collaboration between these two worlds, and that was the success of Aadhaar. Because if you look at the team, there was Nandan Nilekani who came from the entrepreneur. He was everybody knows his contribution in Infosys and in the tech world, but he came as a cabinet minister, so private sector. But there was also a civil servant, for Mr. Harish Sharma, who was the CEO of UID. He was civil servant from the public sector, and the team consisted not only of private sector or public sector. It consisted of a mixed. There were civil servants, there were financial auditor, there were communication team, there were techies. So this was a very unique mix of people who came in, and thinking was not outsourced. That is an important thing in technology projects. You cannot outsource thinking to a third party and say, I have a problem, you give me a solution. You can always take help from different people, but the solution to any technology problem or transformation in government or in private, the thinking should be in-house, and the problem should be analyzed and diagnosed in-house, and a solution should be devised with help, of course, from outside. But so my experience in Aadhaar has been that thinking was never outsourced. There was always deliberation within, different views within, which led to process. So let me come back to Aadhaar and the digital platform. So what is Aadhaar basically? It's a basic digital identity platform. It is agnostic to service, that is agnostic to any particular service, whether it's financial, medical, health. It's just a very thin, simple identity layer. Some would say that why didn't you take health data? Why didn't you take education data? That's not the purpose of Aadhaar. Purpose of Aadhaar is to give you identity. What does that do? One, I said it deduplicates. It becomes unique because deduplication biometrics, and then it authenticates. Once you're enrolled, you can authenticate. And this creates a service layer. Lot of services can be built on this, public sector as well as private sector. Public sector, you can have your direct benefit transfer, which I'll come to, where subsidies are given directly to individuals, to their bank accounts. Public distribution system can use Aadhaar. Health system can use, driving license, banking system is using. So basically different services, public sector services can use Aadhaar. And private sector today, those of you who are in technology can look at India Stack, which is a platform which is using Aadhaar, which is using payment system to provide innovative products in the private sector field. So these are kind of different ways and services that can build on the Aadhaar platform. For government, why was this digital transformation a very challenging and important aspect? Because today, Government of India, the subsidies that are given, whether it is food, fertilizers, petroleum, or agriculture subsidies, almost amount to 3 lakh crore every year to various beneficiaries and accounts. So today, what has happened because of Aadhaar and the payment system, there is a direct benefit transfer to the beneficiaries directly to their bank account. One, they have an Aadhaar account, which is unique, a bank account linked to them. So the Jandan accounts, the JAM, the Jandan accounts, Aadhaar and mobile. So these systems are being used, and this is the latest report that in the COVID period, the direct benefit transfer hit a record high in the last 2 years because of COVID. And as in COVID, the more online transactions were used, and there's in more than 300 schemes in Government of India are now using Aadhaar-based databases to provide benefits directly to the bank accounts. So this is the benefit and inclusion I spoke on the first slide about, services directly going and access to services. This is what it is doing. But why is it challenging in government? Why is it challenging? Aadhaar was not without criticism. Let us remember there was a lot of criticism. You might be remembering the debates. There were, a lot of people criticized that, the state will become a big brother. That is, the state will get all this data, they'll misuse this data, and a lot of poor people will be excluded from benefits, in which in fact is not true, because Aadhaar is benefiting is for inclusion. More people get Aadhaar, they can use it. And then ultimately, this went to the Supreme Court in 2018, and Supreme Court upheld Aadhaar. They said that it is constitutional. It is nothing illegal about Aadhaar, and it basically said that the Aadhaar, it really seeks to secure to the poor and deprived person an opportunity to live with dignity. So there was a right to privacy argument. People argued that individuals have a right to privacy. So my privacy is violated by giving all my biometric data and it being shared by governments. But the Supreme Court said you have a right to privacy. But there are a lot of benefits that Aadhaar gives. It gives direct benefit transfer, employment wages can be given online, financial inclusion it leads, and identity is for inclusion. A person who doesn't have identity is very important. So ultimately, it was upheld, and today, Aadhaar is constitutional. And there is a state of Aadhaar report. Those who are interested should read it, where it takes opinion every year of people themselves. What do they think about Aadhaar? Is it good? Is it bad? How is it benefited? So it is not like 100% everybody says it's good or everybody says bad. There are different views. 95% have Aadhaar. Some say that enrollment has helped me. Some say that my updation was difficult. So there are different views. So this can be used to improve the system. So I'll end the Aadhaar thing by some lessons, and then I'll go to GST in 10 minutes. What lessons do I see in this transformation? One is digital ID or Aadhaar is not a panacea or magic wand to solve all problems. So technology is a very important tool, but it does not mean that all societal problems will vanish away next day with technology coming in, with Aadhaar coming in. And this is true in private sector organizations also. Technological innovation will help and benefit in a particular way, but it does not mean that it will solve all your underlying problems. There may be other causes for this to be sorted out. But there's a tremendous potential for empowerment, inclusion, and access to services by digital transformation. But exclusion should be addressed. What do I mean by exclusion should be addressed? So a lot of people might face exclusion in terms of enrolling for Aadhaar, number one. They may not be able to enroll for Aadhaar. That should be a top priority to get everybody enrolled. Some people may have difficulties with their fingerprints. It has happened that you're not able to, because your fingerprints are not good, you're not able to enroll, you're not able to authenticate properly. These problems will exist. There will be a certain percentage of problems. So if there's a huge percentage with benefits, there will be a small percentage, in spite of the latest technology, who will have problems. You should have a system in place to take care of that exclusion. If you ignore that exclusion, then it becomes a problem. So another challenge is, how do you address this exclusion? How do you create exception handling mechanisms to address this? Now, other important thing in digital transformation is, at least in government, is high political will and buy-in. There has to be a political will to implement. You cannot implement without political support and political will. And in Aadhaar, it was both. If you remember, in 2009, when it was started, there was one government. In 2014, there was another government. Both governments supported it, and that is why today it is at this level. It requires a governance framework, and it requires a lot of stakeholder involvement and coalition of the willing. That is, people should be aware of the incentives of this and benefits. So this is what Aadhaar it's very difficult to summarize in half an hour. I hope I've given you an overall picture of this project. And so what I will do, so let us switch. I have 9:30 now. So half an hour. So I have another 10 minutes, Dr. Nagendra. I can take 10 more minutes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'll stop the Aadhaar story. I hope something will remain. I'll come back to it in the last slide. Now let me take you through 10 or 12 minutes for GST. You are all aware of GST again. I know many of you may not have directly got involved unless you're in businesses and filing returns, but you have read about it. You know. And GST implementation, I'll just go through very quickly on the context, challenges, and lessons only in the context of technology, because today GST, there are a lot of issues. You must have read the Supreme Court decision about the GST Council, the state and union issues. So I'm not touching those issues. I'm touching only the technology. What is the technology? How did it come about? So just a brief overview of GST. You all know 5 years it was implemented, and it's a historic change in tax administration. Those of you who are in businesses would know that it is historic change. It changed a lot of things. It essentially eliminated a lot of taxes and brought in the GST. Border checkposts were totally abolished. If you remember, I'll just show you I don't know, I don't have that slide. So they were within the states. If you're going from Karnataka, I don't know anybody in this group from Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. If you go to a border, Hosur, you will have a huge checkpost and huge line of lorries waiting. These are all goods vehicles which had to be checked in every state before entry. All these checkposts have been abolished now. There's free movement of goods across the country. It created the GST Council. We are all aware of that. And it also created a uniform tax rate structure throughout the country. But what I want to stress on is the technology part. How was GST driven and what was the technology underlying it? There are two aspects. One was a GST network was created. That is a technology provider. GST network was created to provide the software for GST, and number of electronic initiatives like online return filing, online e-way bill, I'll come to them, e-invoicing, and online refund. These were all integral parts of the new GST design. And this is important for digital transformation again, because this is one of the projects which really transformed India's indirect tax regime, but it could not have been done without a technology backbone. That's what I'm trying to stress. And what this basically GST did was look at the pre-GST structure of taxes. There are a lot of central taxes, there are a lot of state taxes. All these were subsumed. Everything disappeared in 2017 when GST was implemented. And there was a single goods and services tax which was levied both by the center and the state. Just to give an idea of how big this change was from a policy perspective. I will not go into this because it is very complex. I'm not going into GST. But what I want to state here is that GST is a very complex law. All tax laws are complex law. It's not a very simple law. So you have CGST, SGST, you have IGST. I won't go into all that. But what I want to stress is that when you have complex tax laws, you require a very agile IT system to handle. I'll explain what that is. So all this tax system should have a very agile and very, very well-developed IT system to handle it. And how was it done? It was done by creating the GSTN, I said, but it was also a unified portal. You had a single digital portal for the entire country. And you had e-way bill for transportation and e-invoicing for invoicing. I'll come to both of them. And these are three digital innovations that have happened in India. What is this unified portal? Those of you who do business will know that every single GST registrant who's doing business will look at the same portal throughout the country. Earlier, it was different. Different states had their own technology, their own portals. Some states had manual filing also. They did not have digital filing. This was all transformed and made into a single digital portal where all registrations, returns, and payment were on a single portal. So look at the scale again. Digitally, for more than, today in India, there are 1 crore GST registration, more than 1 crore GST registrations. So 1% of India's population that way, but these are businesses, are GST. All of them get registration in the same way, on the same system, file their returns monthly on the same system, and make their tax payment on the same system, and also get refund. So, and this is a real-time system. So you can register online real-time, you can make payment, you can do that. And no more manual process. This is very important. So manual process is totally removed. And even state governments are using GST data to monitor defaulters. So real-time data is there. Because of this real-time digital transformation, the challenges of tax administration also are different. So now you can monitor defaulters, tax defaulters real-time. So if Dr. Nagendra Chaudhary is a tax registrant from Delhi, and he regularly files his return, but for 5 months he has not filed his return. So earlier manual system is very difficult. You have to go through, you'll have to send a notice, you have to see. Today, by a click of a button, I know till what date Dr. Nagendra Chaudhary would have filed his return. So these are real-time, solutions for tax and compliance. And a lot of data is there available where matching of data takes place, and matching of data from income tax, from banks to GST system, basically to enhance compliance. And this is important in the digital context. There's also the e-way bill, which has come in GST. This is a system where any transportation of goods above 50,000 in the country requires the generation of an electronic document. You don't need a paper document when you're going, when the transportation takes place. You can just online register this movement, get an e-way bill number, and that can be used. And this helps in many ways. Once the registration e-way bill is generated for a particular, say I'm transporting furniture from Bangalore to Delhi of say 50 lakhs. The transporter generates an e-way bill that immediately comes into the system for the government. Government knows that this is the transportation taking place. This is the tax that has to come into the system. And if at the later point in time the tax for this system, for this movement is not paid or it is not reported, there is a way of tracking it down. So it's very important that these are all compliance systems, challenges that are being sorted out by technology. And you look at e-invoice. E-invoice today is that when you go to a restaurant or when you go to a shop, you can also get a manual invoice today, a bill today. You can get a manual bill or you can get a computer generated bill. But for businesses above 20 crore turnover, there has to be an e-invoice. That means, what is the e-invoice? That is the generation of the invoice, that is a bill, should be on the system, on an online portal, which again data comes to the central, central and state governments, so that it gets integrated to your returns, and the returns can be filed easily. So these are again a lot of digital transformation in GST which is taking place. And this is creating one is ease of doing business. It's much easier. Some would argue that it's become very complex, but that's a debate that you can have always on both sides. But it's a data driven. What I'm trying to say is GST most complex is a data driven system today, most complex data driven system which is being handled by again in-house GST and created so on. What were the challenges in GST? In Aadhaar we had a lot of challenges about scale, about about biometrics and so on. What are challenges in GST? In GST, if you remember in 2017 and 18, when it was launched, there were a lot of glitches in the system. There were errors, there were bugs, there were volume thresholds. That is, beyond a point you could not file, it used to hang. And it requires a lot of behavioral change from the business side also, and from the tax administrator side also. And having worked in the tax administration system for more than 7 years, I know that these systems, you cannot just bring in a technology without addressing the human aspect of it. How will human behavior react to technology change? How do you bring about a change management system which will address adoption, which will incentivize people to adopt it better? These are challenges in both government and private sector. You have to think holistically rather than thinking of only the technology. And there were many challenges. So there were charges, they were led to criticism that GSTR was launched without preparation. If you hear the criticism that the whole GSTR 1, 2, 3, the returns which was there in place, that system that was dropped, and a monthly return was introduced, GSTR 3B, which was much more simpler. So people said, is the technology too fragile? And even the GST Council took they took up these issues. Mr. Sushil Modi, who was the Deputy Chief Minister of Bihar, he, as a minister, he headed a GST group of ministers on IT. So look at the importance of IT in government, how what impact it has, and how important it is to have a good system. So there are a lot of issues. A constant response to feedback was given. It became agile, adaptive, and ultimately it improved over time. But the challenges in GST were slightly different from Aadhaar, in the sense the business rules in GST was very complex. If you remember in Aadhaar, the design was very simple, minimal data, very simplistic approach. GST, you see the tax rules by their very nature are very, quite complex. That there is input tax credit, there is a set off, there are different taxes, CGST, SGST, settlement. So once you have complex business rule, it becomes more difficult for a technology system to deal with it. And there were constant changes in the rules because, GST also was evolving the first few years. So obviously, when you have changes in business rules, the technology also will suffer. So this is important for managers to understand that making too many changes in your business rules very rapidly can have a very negative impact on the technology. So we have to keep in mind. And also over expectation that technology will be a magic wand. Same thing like Aadhaar. It's not that, we'll have an online system, everybody will come on to saying there will be, easy adoption. There's a lot of behavioral change, as I said, change management, and stabilization takes time. So what that taught us was you should do a calibrated implementation. So some were implemented over time, like Aadhaar, that really helped. So I'll come to my last slide and then I'll open it for questions for 20 minutes. So I'll end with this. Now, when you do digital transformation, there are a number of paradigms of thinking about digital transformation. One is that paradigm of inclusion and access. That is, technology has immense scope to provide benefits, right? To change people's lives. We have seen it in our own lives where digital technology makes it convenient for us to access many services. You can do transfer, you can do online net banking, you can buy, you can buy online, you can do shopping. So and a lot of people can get benefits from it. But there is also a fear that it could lead to exclusion. It could lead to the state having too much data, and this exclusion and fear aspect should be addressed. Whether it's government or private sector, you have to address it in a behavioral way, in a way of convincing that this is not actually the purpose. The purpose is very different. And also, if there is exclusion, we should have a way to solve that exclusion. The third paradigm is that a set of people think that technology can be really transformational. It can be the innovation system. It can create an innovation system where entrepreneurs can benefit, startups can come up. You have the startup program. So there is a great scope. And there is another paradigm, last paradigm, that says that look at the data. How is digital transformation helping in inclusion? So if you have a program implementing a digital system, how has it helped the ultimate consumer? How many people have benefited? Who has been excluded? You need to do that. So anybody implementing digital programs should have these four paradigms in mind. At least in my view, should keep it in mind and implement. And I feel that digital transformation in coming days is inevitable. It's the innovation age. But you should manage the transition you should anticipate that there will be problems in transition. You should ideally have diverse teams to implement it, and being agile and adaptive in the system is very critical. Knowing that you have a plan, that's the only way the plan will go is a suicidal way. You should be ready to adapt to changes, ready to course correct, which happened in GST a lot. And you should be ready. When you talk about digital transformation, there's also always this idea. You have an idea and you have to transform that idea into a reality. It does not happen very easily. You have to have a coalition of partners. You should have incentives and an out-of-box thinking that will help. And ultimately, I'll end by saying that more simple the design, more simple the thinking, the basis, the more easy to implement technology projects. So with this, I will end my journey. I hope I have not been too fast on this, and I could welcome any interaction, which let me just stop the share. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Srikar. I think we have quite a few questions. With your permission, can I relay them to you?
Sure.
Yeah, very good. So the first question is from Mr. Amit Vartak, and his question is: so can we consider Aadhaar as one of the great initiatives by Government of India on DEI initiatives? Thank you, Amit.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get the last part of the question.
On DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
In fact, if you look at the initial thinking about Aadhaar, it was not initial, but even today, the main thrust of Aadhaar is for inclusion. It is a development project. It is not a national security project or project for providing security. It is basically how can more services of government reach the people. So obviously, it is an inclusion project. It is and it includes the entire population in that sense. And it also gives, since the platform, in fact, if you look at the platform approach, various services for various kinds of people, for various kinds of challenges can be adopted through Aadhaar. So I would agree that it's a platform, it's a base. But at the same time, Aadhaar by itself will not solve it. You have to build systems over it to kind of it to work.
Thank you, Srikar. The next question is from Mr. Akshay, and his question is: legislation of data privacy in India, like UK, and its implementation in proper manner, especially on the backdrop of tech-led companies and digital economy. Request you to please share your thoughts and your views.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So, if when Aadhaar was being implemented, if you recall, there was this issue of privacy, right? So data privacy is very important, and right to privacy is also a fundamental right. And data should be in the hands of the person who owns the data. And if you look at big tech today, the discussion in Europe and US, where antitrust legislation, antitrust action against big tech is really moving at a fast pace. This question of privacy and a framework is very important. And if you look at, if you see the Supreme Court decision when it upheld Aadhaar, they made an observation. They said that it is very critical immediately to have a data privacy law in India, which is not only for Aadhaar, which is overall. I mean, it's not only Aadhaar which challenges idea of privacy. There, I mean, every aspect on the net or every aspect of interaction on the net or otherwise is has a privacy angle. So you need a data privacy law, and as you know, it is in under discussion. It is in Parliament. There was a committee which went into it. So I do agree that that has to be a part of the discussion and a legislative framework.
This is a question from Shekhar Subramanian. I think it's a long question, but let me have the pleasure of leading out to you, Shekhar. And his question is, can't we have an Aadhaar type unique ID for property registrations in a centralized land registry? The reason I'm asking is because even to this date, even if you take the state of Karnataka, if one registers his property for banking or loan purposes, etc., the same property can be registered in another person's name at a nearby registrar's office in a different micro market. Hence, the systems are not talking to each other at all. A lot of frauds have also taken place due to this lack of real-time cross-checking of land registrations under respective owners or people claiming to be owners. Thank you, Shekhar.
Yeah, thank you, Srikar. That's a good question again, but let me confess, I'm not very well aware of the latest developments in land registration in Karnataka also, because I've not dealt with that area, so I wouldn't want to speak about it. But that's a great question. But if I recall right, in Karnataka was the pioneer in digitization of rural land records. The Bhumi project, which was implemented more than 2 decades ago, has digitized all your panis in the rural areas and all property records, and that in fact is kind of has been integrated to the Kaveri, the system of land registration in Karnataka. So I think in the rural aspect there is that integration. In the urban, I think there's more work to be done, and I think there are some projects which are going to which would address this issue.
The next question is from Sunil Srikar, and his question is how individual knows this information is protected. Again, I think something to do with the data protection and the data privacy. Is there any agency which can certify information is not being shared or hacked?
Yeah, so there are 2-3 aspects of it. So one is, I mean, so there are 2-3 things. One, there is a legal framework. You have Aadhaar Act, which basically clearly lays down that data cannot be shared. There is the security of data. There are punishments for fraud. That is the legal aspect. Second aspect is that this is managed by the government. This is a government project. This is not a private project where even the enrollment data which you have, it is not that it is there in the central identity depository, CIDR, which is a protected national database in India. So it's in fact, the center is in Bangalore. If you know, with a backup in Delhi, or I think it's in Manesar. So so basically, data, of course, physically and in terms of and this data, this biometric data and other data is not available on the net. It's not that it's openly available. You can't Google or you can't see. So this is basically authentication happens only with a secure system. And of course, I mean, I'm not a. Let me give a caveat. I'm not a technology person. I'm a civil servant who has dealt with technology projects. So there are a lot of people thinking about security, and this is, I would say, there's a top priority in terms of data not being. So they're very strict security protocols. But they can. When you talk of hacks or you talk about leakage, you have to look at, so sometimes you'll have a report that, other system hacked or something. So you have to look at the actual, so sometimes, an enrollment agency, when an enrollment agency is enrolling at that point, there can be a situation where there is some kind of, lapse in security, lapse in protocol, where the leakage of data happens. And that has happened because of some lapse, and that has to be strengthened. But that doesn't mean the whole other database is accessible, right? So you have to be nuanced and you have to see the actual what has happened. why it is, what is the reason, where is the source. So I'm sure that this, this security aspect of data is quite top on the agenda, and it is very sensitive data. You can't otherwise deal with it.
Next question is from Mr. Sunil Joshi, Srikar, and his question is why Aadhaar has been made compulsory by implementation agencies, even though court says it is to be used only for beneficiaries of government services.
No, so I would not be able to comment on which agencies and what, but the so there are two aspects of it. One is that for the Supreme Court has also said for public delivery of services for benefits, and if you have a legal framework, you have a legislative framework for making it mandatory, it is allowed. For private sector, for private purposes or private applications, you cannot make it mandatory. So so the Supreme Court has obviously, it has laid down certain categories of public services that can make it mandatory. So it has said subsidies, delivery of services, and other things. So if it falls under that category, and if it is as per the Aadhaar Act, it can be made mandatory. But otherwise, I don't think private sector and private services are making it mandatory. At least that's my knowledge. I've not seen the latest.
This is a question from one of the participants. His question is, which were the analytical tools that have been used for Aadhaar and GST to make it robust and efficient? Were there any analytical tools that were used for Aadhaar and GST to make them efficient and robust?
Oh, I wouldn't know the exact analytical tools, but in GST, for example, I recall, I'm no longer in GST now, but I recall at that time when, it was being done, and there was a BIFA module, Business Intelligence and Fraud Analytics module, which was developed by GSTN, which basically looked at, registration data, returns data from other sources, and build up this, through machine learning and, AI, build up this system of kind of detecting potential fraud and seeing, kind of linking the chain of input tax credit. So very, very, very interesting analysis made. Lot of tools. Those of you who are techies here and who are in the artificial AI and BI streams would know that there is. When you have this data and when you have this live system, you can create this. There's no end. There's no limit to it. So what I'm saying is that these are being used today, and it's a agile process. It's a constant process. So what I noticed is that when even these systems cannot be created in a vacuum, because tax systems, how they function is a very very unique system and the ground. So the feedback from the tax department and the officers on how fraud actually takes place, what kind of players, what is their modus, that feeds into this IT system. That is the important part, and then creates better modules of business intelligence and fraud detection. And in fact, that has led to a lot of chains, because input tax credit is basically when you link up and you claim input tax credit from vendor to vendor, it creates a chain. So if there's a one fraud in the system, you can always link it up and see the other factors. So very interesting models are being developed to detect.
This is a question from Mr. Anupam Pathak, and his question is Anupam from Assam. Since implementation of Aadhaar was a mega project, couldn't or shouldn't Aadhaar have replaced all PAN cards or voter IDs and driving licenses instead of people having to carry multiple IDs? And also, Srikar, next question from Nikhil Jain also is something to do with this. Let me read out his question as well so that you can answer to both of them. Good evening, sir. I have two questions on Aadhaar. There was a speculation that government is planning to merge Aadhaar with PAN card. What was the concept on this, and why it didn't put into action? The second one was on GST. Is there any concept of area-based exemption under GST, such as defense or related suppliers?
Yeah. So on the first question, Aadhaar. So you have to again understand that this Aadhaar is not to replace every other identity card, because every identity card has a particular function and has a purpose. For example, PAN card it has a purpose of filing your income tax. Passport is for for travel. So if you look at Aadhaar, you look at again the simplicity. So you have to understand that the design is simple, that it cannot have all data of all uses and functions. It would have become unimplementable if you had said that Aadhaar will include your income status, would also include your your for passport or driving license, it will include your data of driving. It would have resulted in non-implementation because it's very complex. So what other it is not seeking to replace, but what other can do is that since it is unique, it can permeate all these databases and become a common unique identifier, which is very useful in public databases, because then you can see that a person who has a PAN card who's paying income tax should not be getting PDS, right? Should not be getting public distribution system benefits, or should not be getting a pension, or somebody who's in one system should not be eligible in another system. So it is not to replace, it will continue to exist, but other will provide that link, as I said. And there was no intention right from the beginning also to replace any card. It was not to replace the entire system and bring it. It was only a unique ID to establish identity, which can be used by different systems in their own system. The second question was on on exemption-based, area-based. No, so there's no area-based exemption. There is, so GST, of course, there is. I mean, there's not nothing to do with technology, but you have, so when you have a tax structure, you have rates of tax. You have 0, 5, 12, 18, and 28%. But you also have a huge set of exemptions in GST. Exemptions of goods that are exempted from GST and services that are exempted. And these are notifications. So they are more products and services based and not area based. So I mean, it's not that a particular area is exempted from GST, but obviously certain products and goods are exempted.
This is a question from Mr. Ravi Krishna Arpan, and his question is: what were some of the tech challenges in the implementation of Aadhaar, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, it's very difficult to kind of summarize it. As I said, the scale was the biggest tech challenge, right? I mean, how do you deduplicate this? It is not just collection of data. Every time deduplication is a big technology challenge, and the technology team really did that with architecture and with the latest technology and learning, and successfully today deduplicating more than 1 billion. So today, imagine that I don't have an Aadhaar number. I come to enroll. My biometrics, I give my fingerprint, iris, and number, and my demographic detail. My data will go and it will search, it will check against 1.3 billion records in a matter of, I don't know the time now, how long it takes, but in record time, and then generates the number. So this is, I mean, to work, and this did not happen overnight. There was, since the project was launched in 2009, there was a lot of technology experts and work which was done on the biometric field, and then they came out with this. So I think that was, on the technology side, I would say this deduplication was one of the most complex, and also enrollment. How do you make enrollment standardized? Because you don't have control over the environment. Yes. Somebody can be enrolling in some village, somebody can be enrolling in a city, different. So the software or the data that is collected, that software has to be robust enough to take care of these contingencies. So I think these were the two main challenges that were overcome.
The next question from Mr. Lijan Viju Samuel. The question is: when we are talking about being agile and adaptive in large-scale projects, then would design thinking in the start really help? Thank you, Lijan.
Yeah, absolutely. Systems thinking, design thinking, all this helps. In fact, I mean, one aspect of thinking holistically, which is a primary aspect of systems thinking and not thinking in silos, really was the thinking of Aadhaar. It was the thinking overall, and how not only technology, how will it impact, how when enrollment takes place, how will it impact, and at different scales and different areas. So I think there was a lot of system thinking that went in ultimately to I mean the rollout seems to be pretty simple, and I think, but the thinking that went behind it was very, as you aptly said, it requires that holistic purpose.
And this is a question from Bhumika Singh Srikar, and seems pretty large. Good evening, sir. Thank you for such an insightful session. You explained in such a way that it felt like the whole planning and implementation was seamless instead of being a tough task. My question is, as compared with other countries, is there any aspect that our other system should include? That's the first one. Second question is, especially including the health-related data, because after going through the pandemic period, it feels like to have this data too handy for emergency conditions. Thank you, Bhumika.
Yeah, thanks, Mika, for that question. The second question I'll try to answer. So yeah, again, very important point about health. So you know that the digital health mission is now being implemented. It's a national project, and digital records are being a kind of seamless access to digital records. The project is so it's not going to be simple. So because Aadhaar was so again, if you have health data in your initial Aadhaar project, then it will become unwieldy again. So imagine when you go for enrollment, somebody asking you about your health details, about your health records, just impossible. You would not have been able to implement. So, but what you're saying is correct. Now there has to be a digital health record system can use Aadhaar as one of the constituent fields, and that could help in linking the database in different systems of this person, the unique ID, which can then give a seamless kind of flow of information for the benefit of both the client and the service provider, so the doctor. So I see huge scope. I'm sure the more work is being done in this area.
And this is actually second question from Mr. Ravi Krishnathan Srikar. And his question, I think, a very interesting level. How to differentiate between digitization and digital transformation? Is digital transformation a prerequisite for digitization? Just want to understand the key differences. Thank you, Ravi.
Okay, let me try to digital transformation and digitization. Yeah, so I would say other way around. I would say digitization is, when you are kind of going from a manual system to an IT-based system and, taking digitizing records and so on. But digital transformation is a much more larger question. Digital transformation is when that system becomes the pivot around which your functioning happens. It's not just digitization for digitization's sake. Today, you have many systems in private and in government where you have some form of digitization, but that is not the core of your activity. They exist, but still a manual system is working, or a system outside the digitized system is working. Then it's not transformation. Digital transformation is when the digitization provides a scope for the way that business is conducted. It transforms it, as well as transforms access and inclusion to a lot of people. I think that's the way you have to look at digital transformation.
And next question is from Purva Kalita, and his question is: while digital transformation is the way forward, how can we overcome the hurdles in digital adoption among people across different sections of society? There could be resistance due to lack of literacy or will, and inaccessibility among other reasons. That's his question, Srikar.
Yeah, that's a great question again. So I alluded to it a little bit when I talked about behavioral change management. Also, I think we should also not, forget the fact that a huge population in India uses digital technology, uses mobiles. Mobile penetration is very high today. It's not that people are, illiterate about the benefits of, say, mobiles or technology that can give them. It's only that there certain aspects of it they may not be aware, or they may not understand the benefits that it gives. So I think the important thing is, how do you have a communication system, campaign, or communication plan strategy that provides a clear view of what are the incentives or what are the benefit that this digital transformation will give me, and what do I need to do to get that benefit, what's in it for me. So even this incentive system is important. You cannot force a digital transformation, it will fail. So you need an incentive system, and this will differ in different for different people, different areas, different times, and different purposes. So I think it's important to have that in mind. And that's why I said, again, systems thinking, design, overall thinking, this is a very important aspect. How will it be perceived? How will change management need to be done? And how do you send the message of incentivization?
Thank you, Srikar. I think we have already overshot some time. And with your permission, can I take two more questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's end it with two more.
Yeah. So in this question is again related to Aadhaar and Aadhaar. How does Aadhaar compare with SSN, Social Security Number, the identity mechanism in USA, or National Insurance Number in UK? Or any similarities or differences? Is one better than the other?
That's a great question. I would say Aadhaar is better. So I'll tell you why. I'm presently in the US, and I had this process of looking at the SSN system. First of all, today the SSN system is manual today. Today it is also manual. So you have to manually fill up a form and send it by post or fax or thing, and then the interview, and then the SSN number comes by post to me manually. Secondly, SSN does not have biometrics. The biometrics is not captured for SSN. So I would say Aadhaar is any day. Of course, SSN has a different set of functions. There's much more data in it. It's for other social security purpose in the US. But I would say on the digital front, if you're looking at digital transformation, Aadhaar, there's no comparison. Aadhaar is way forward.
Thank you. This is the last question for today evening, Srikar, and this question is from Mr. Suresh Diokar. Putting, sir, to avoid misuse of both Aadhaar and GST and any technological development like blockchain technology being introduced by Government of India?
Well, I'm not really sure about what the latest technology being used, but I'm sure. One thing I'm sure. I think the latest technologies like blockchain, and other kind of developments. Well, important thing is not only for other GST, for any organization which is dealing with latest technology aspect, is to have a team which looks at these latest developments and see how they can be adopted. It's part of being agile, and I'm sure the teams are looking at it. I'm not part of both the systems now, but I'm sure that it's a great question that you have to look at these latest systems and see how your system can become more agile.
Thank you so much, Srikar. I think that completes our brief interaction. And once again, thank you for joining us from Boston. And sorry to disturb you on Saturday, especially in the morning. But it's absolutely pleasure to have your I think the first time kind of information from you, both from the great projects that India has ever seen, Aadhaar as well as GST. And I think while we have seen the other side of the uproar in the public domain, but I think you have given us the implementation and like you rightly said, the practitioner's point of view. I think that actually gives us not just the bird's eye view of what went in behind those things, but also the kind of the thought processes that have gone into building these two very, very difficult structures. Because we know for sure that I'm sure all the participants also would know that whatever companies that they're working for, even the small project that any company takes, and there is so much of uproar that happens, like you rightly said, change management kind of thing. But I think that given the scale and given the intensity of these two projects, I think people like you and maybe other civil servants, technologists, and maybe other people, I think their contributions are absolutely marvelous. Thank you so much once again, and have a wonderful time in Boston, and look forward to hosting you and in our office when you visit Bombay or Bangalore, Srikar. Please let us know.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much.